Hey, Chad here with LearnMixedReality.com, and we're starting a tutorial series to actually create a full game that's going to run on the Windows Mixed Reality devices. So last week I actually kind of laid the groundwork, and we started off with just getting going with a mixed reality project. And this week we're going to actually start a new project with the purpose of creating a full game. So this week we're going to actually just get our game level created, at least the first parts of it. Next week we'll actually work on the core game logic, and we'll just keep on progressing until we get done with a full game that runs on Windows Mixed Reality devices. So let's dig in. Now, back in February I actually created a game for the HoloLens called HoloValentine. And it was a shell game, you know, 3-card Monte, where you're trying to figure out where the candy was in these chocolate Valentine heart shells. So that was a lot of fun, but I did in like 4 days as far as the actual coding time. And it was pretty rough around the edges. But at the same time, just so folks would have it, I went ahead and released the source code. Now what I'm doing is I'm kind of building off that experience and creating a full game like that, but doing it in such a way that I can actually teach it as I go. So it's going to be a full game, keeping track of scores, keeping track of a win state, and it's going to be using the Windows Mixed Reality devices. We're going to deploy it on those, and we're going to be using the Mixed Reality Toolkit so we can work with the motion controllers, for example. Okay, so let's go and dig right in. You see I have Unity here, and I'm currently using version 2017.2 OF3, and I'm using the Mixed Reality Technical Preview 3. Chances are if you're using a newer version, you're fine. As of the time of recording this, just the 2017.2.OF3 by itself wasn't good enough. There's some bugs in it from the mixed reality side of things. If you are watching this here in November, then you might want to go and just grab this version. All right, so that out of the way, let's go ahead and create the project. All right, so Unity is loaded. I'm going to go ahead and create a folder in here, and I'm going to call it MRTK for Mixed Reality Toolkit. And before I bring that in, I'm actually going to be using some of the .NET 4.6 API. So the first thing I'm going to do is go in here to File, Build Settings, Player Settings, and then under Other Settings, I'm going to change the scripting runtime version from .NET 3.5 to .NET 4.6. Now this is experimental, but I've not had any issues with it. Now that I've done that, I need to restart Unity. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And the reason why I'm running this is so I can really get some benefit from the new C# 5 and 6 code and certain functionality that I just enjoy coding. Now I grabbed the source code from GitHub, like I've showed in the previous video. So I'm just going to copy the MCS RSP file directly into assets. Now I'll copy the rest of these into the MRTK folder. Alright, so all the files are copied over. I'm going to go up here to Mixed Reality Toolkit now that we have this menu item. I'm going to say Apply Mixed Reality Project Settings. I'm going to make sure I target the occluded devices and enable Xbox controller support. Hit apply. And now we see we're using the Universal Windows platform. And we go here to File, Build Settings, and also see that we have our little Unity guy here, meaning that that's our selected platform. While I'm in here, I'm going to change the target device to any device instead of HoloLens. We're going to select Unity C# projects. I'm going to close this and select on the Mixed Reality Configure again and say Project Settings, because I don't believe it took the occluded devices or Xbox controller. So I'm going to select those again. And this is a bug in the toolkit right now, because you'll know if it did this because it'll actually bring up a dialog box asking you to confirm to overwrite your input settings. So we're going to apply, and this is the box right here. And they just want to override the input manager asset that's usually in your project settings folder. And we do want to allow that. So we'll let that update. At the same time, we'll go back here to build settings, go to player settings, and then down here in XR, we'll see that the virtual reality support is checked. Now for now, I want to go ahead and set the project up for that, but I'm going to uncheck the box. That way, while we are playing, it's just going to be here in Unity and not in the headset. If I actually want to see my progress in the headset, in the mixed reality device itself, I just need to make sure I go to the XR settings and select the virtual reality report is supported, and then make sure Windows Mixed Reality is selected from the list. Okay, and that'll be the list right down here. Okay, but for now, we're going to uncheck that. We'll come back to the Mixed Reality Toolkit again, and now I'm going to say apply scene settings. Now this is going to actually add in that Mixed Reality camera prefab, so the things I showed in last week's video of getting started. The Mixed Reality Toolkit actually does all those things for us out of the box. So we can just simply say apply scene settings, and now our original camera disappeared, and now we have this Mixed Reality camera parent with the default cursor and input manager. Now, one other thing you want to do here, if you brought those in manually, is to make sure that the cursor under the input manager is associated to the cursor that you brought in. So basically dragging, let's say, default cursor over there. And you see that's what's already on there, so I'm going to just hit escape because it's already associated to it. But if you added those individually, then you want to make sure that you associate the cursor that you brought in, whether it was the basic cursor, default cursor, or just cursor, to your input manager. It will find it. If you don't do this, you won't get an error, but you'll get a warning because it actually has to do a find to actually find in your project. Okay. So now that I actually have this project or the scenes created, let's go into our assets and create a folder called scenes. And we're going to save the scene as main. Let's go ahead and create some other folders we definitely need as well. So we'll go to create a materials folder. And we'll need a scripts folder. We'll actually need a plugins folder because we'll be doing that next week. Is we're going to create a plugin where we're going to actually have our game logic in that plugin. You don't have to do that. But we're going to do some testing, and I like using the testing framework called xUnit. Now, since I'm actually making a full game here, I'm trying to go about it similar to how I make a project. And it'll deviate from some of my past tutorials because usually in my past tutorials I'm trying to teach a very specific thing. And in this one it's more about, work with me as I create this full game. It's not going to be a complex game, but it's going to be a full game from start to finish that'll run on these mixed reality devices. And as a result, I want to work with the code in a particular way. And one of those is writing tests against my actual game logic. So not everything's going to have a test around it, but my core game logic to make sure that it's working the way I want it to. Without the complexities of being hooked onto a different UI components, I want to have that testable. And the easiest way for me to do that, while Unity has testing built in, and you can use in-unit to do that, I prefer the xUnit, and I'll actually run my test in Visual Studio. I also have Visual Studio Ultimate, or Enterprise, I guess is what they call it now, and that has live testing as well, which I enjoy. So that part may or may not interest you, but it won't take too terribly long when we talk about that next time. But for now, let's go ahead and create our environment. It's not just be at least a simplistic version of our environment, and that's going to be by creating a table and then some shells, and that's just going to be some cubes, and finally the P. In this case, we're actually going to be creating 3 P's, because again, the game we're making is like a shell game. So the person has, these 3 shells, and the P is in one of the shells. He mixes them around, and you got to figure out, which shell the P is in. Okay, so that's the game. That's what we're making. So with that, let's go ahead and create a 3D object. We'll make a cube here. I'm going to call this cube table. We'll go into my materials. I'm going to create a new material by right-clicking and saying create material. And I'm just going to call this table. And I'm just going to change the color of this by clicking on that to kind of a brown. So go down here, we'll just kind of select the brown. Okay. Now I'm going to drag the material on top of my table, and now it's going to be brown. Now my camera, when you're working with mixed reality, your camera is going to be at position 0, 0, 0. So you could change your camera to be, let's say 1.6 meters high, more about, the average height of a human, if you will, or 6 feet or what have you. And you could do that, and everything else in the world could be at the origin. So that is a possibility. You don't have to make it the origin, but I typically do, and shift everything down 1.6 or 3 or whatever it happens to be. So, and in the mixed reality deal, I typically will do it a little bit lower than 1.6. And for this, we'll probably just start out with -3. So for that, let's go and take our table and do that. We'll just say this is -3 meters down. And so that we can actually see it when it spawns, we'll put it 3 in front of the camera as well. And what this means is if I hit play, I can look down and see the camera down there. And we can actually see the box is below the floor that gets spawned. Because remember, in the mixed reality camera parent, there's actually a boundary that has this floor quad that gets spawned for us. And right now, the table is being intersected by that floor. So let's see what it looks like if we do minus 1.5. You see that's above 1.8, 9, 2, 2.4, 2.5, 2.6 is too far. So we'll say minus 2.5. Okay. So we'll stop that and change this back to minus 2.5. Just hit play again. And we can see that the table there is on the floor. Okay. Now, these little hands that you see right here on the left and right, this is from the Mixed Reality Toolkit. It's actually the input manager is what's making those visible. And I can hold down my left shift button, and that makes it look like I'm holding up my left hand in front of the HoloLens. Now, this Mixed Reality Toolkit allows you to write code and write your project in such a way that works both with the HoloLens as well as the immersive headsets like the Acer, the Asus, the Dell, the HP, the Lenovo, etc., etc., etc. So, while inside of here right now, I'll be clicking on the left hand by holding shift and, tapping. That'll be the same as holding a motion controller and pointing it at the, cube and pulling the trigger. Okay? All right, so we'll stop playing that. All right, so let's zoom in on this table here. And look at the same way our camera is looking. I'm going to save the scene. And now I'm going to right click on the table and say create object. And now I'm going to create another cube. And this cube is going to be our first shell. You don't have to use your imagination, but you could obviously replace this with any sort of 3D model that you wanted to. But for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to use a cube here. And I'm going to call it item 1. I'm going to scale it down to 0.2, 0.2, and 0.2. And we're going to bump it up here, I don't know, let's see, 0.6. And just to make sure, yep, 0.6 should be good. And since this is our first one, we want 3 of these, 3 shells. We'll say minus, what's 0.3 probably? Yep, 0.3, perfect. So that'll be our first one. And while we're here in this guy, I'm going to go ahead and create another 3D object. This one's going to be a sphere. And I just right-clicked and made him a child of item. And I'm going to rename the sphere to P. So again, so we have our item 1, could call it shell 1, but I'll just leave it as item 1 for now. And then P. And for that, I'm going to create another material here. So create a new material. And we'll call this P. Might help if I didn't capitalize the E in there. So let's do it again. And for this material, let's just make it a blue. So we'll make it kind of that blue right there. I'm going to drag that onto the P. Now, if I come over here to the item 1 and disable mesh renderer, we can see the P inside of there. Now I want to make that P smaller. So I'm going to say 0.5, 0.5, and 0.5 to make it half the size that it was. And I actually want it on the table itself instead of floating in the air. So let's do minus 0.3. Well, let's scroll in there just to see if we're actually on the table or under it. Yeah, so we're kind of under it. So if I go back to 3, 2, 9, 2, 8, 2, 7. Let's take a look at that. That seems pretty good to me. So we're going to leave it at 2, 7. All right, so again, the item is the shell, if you will, and then our P is the P. And I could make it green. That might would make more sense to make it green. So let's do that instead of blue. Let's turn around and we'll make it green because it's a P. And dark P. And obviously you could do all kinds of things instead of being metallic. You could do something different there. But I'm not going to mess with any of the graphic part of this. I'll leave that up to you. And you have a full week to make this look the way you want to. The main thing is that we have the P being a child of the shell. Okay. So now that we've done that, I'm going to go ahead and enable my mesh renderer again. And I'm going to select item 1 and hit Control D to duplicate it. And I'm going to rename this to item 2. And then I'm going to change the position, the X position, to 0. Right? I'm going to then duplicate it one more time. Call it item 3. And we'll do that as 0.3 this time. Right? So now we have all 3 shells. Each one has its own P in there. And we will hide all the P's, shuffle these things around, and then show the P only once the user selected on it, assuming that the P is really there. That way you don't run into the situation where the user is cheating by just getting really close to the cube since they are the camera. So those are some of the things you need to think about when you're writing something for mixed reality. That's where we want to leave off with this one. That's really just getting our environment set up. And I'm not going to create, maybe if there's time at the end of the tutorial, create a full-fledged room, like a virtual reality room here. For now, I'm just going to leave it like that. But obviously, if you're making this for an immersive headset, you would want a full environment. But for now, going through this tutorial, I'm just going to leave the environment just like it is here, just having the table with these 3 shells or these 3 cubes with the peas on the inside. Next week, we're going to actually dive into the logic. We're going to create the logic as its own C# library, and then we're going to bring it into Unity as a plugin. And that way we can write tests against that library in Visual Studio. So that's going to be next week. So for now, let me go and save this scene and save the project. And we'll pick up from here next week. So hopefully you enjoyed the tutorial today. Next week, we're going to dive right in and jump into the logic of the game. So hopefully you'll join me for that. Now, if you liked the video, feel free to hit like. If you didn't like it, go ahead and hit that dislike button. I'll be okay. And if you're not subscribed and you want to, go ahead and click that subscribe button. That way you have a chance of being notified when the new videos come out. So I'll be creating these every single week and until we get this game done. And so you can just follow along and you will have a full game that will run on these Windows Mixed Reality devices. Well, I hope you have a fantastic week, and I'll see you in the next video.